All right, let's get started. Thank you for everybody who's here today. Welcome to the last day of the One Health Summer Learning Experience. We're going to talk about the last part of cell biology. I've had a couple questions in the chat so far about accessing the modules, and we're going to work through that together as a group here in a minute so that everybody can get access to what they need, especially for our post-test we have to do today. But please, if you have any other questions right now about what we've already covered or what we're going to do today, go ahead and put them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask. Okay, I see a question from one of our students about not being able to access parts of the modules. And I think I figured out how to fix that. So I'm going to show us all together since so many people seem to be having the same issue. Thanks for letting me know. I'll make sure I cover that specifically when I go through my solution for us. So let's rock and roll. I set aside that time for us now, so isn't that perfect? So I would really appreciate if you guys would all do this alongside me so that when we officially release you to do your section today, we can all be on the same page about what everything should look like. So if everybody can please join me at the website I dropped in the chat, the One Health module homepage, and I'll give you about 10 seconds to join me there. Okay, since I hope we're all here now, today we are going to access our account. I'm going to click register/login. And once you're here, if you'll please click One Health Learning Modules. Okay, now we're going to click into our cell biology one specifically. And when we click on it, it kicks us to here so that we can also click Begin Cell Biology module. So I know that this point right here with all the tiles visible is where most people are having an issue, where they're not allowed to click on one of the tiles or they can't find the section we were in because it asks for the pretest to be done again. Somebody's messaged me that they need the registration key. That's a little strange because I believe we all should have been registered to even get to this point. So if you'll hold on to that thought, I'll send you the registration key, or yeah, I'll send that to you in just a minute, okay? Yours is a different issue. But once we get to this screen, some of you may have already retaken the pretest for me so that you could access things yesterday. But to make sure that it works, I would like if everybody would please click on the pretest tile. And then let's go ahead and click on complete the cell biology pretest. If you prefer it in Spanish, that's also totally okay. Now it shows that I've already finished it, as it should for everybody else. It says summary of previous attempts. I've already done mine, so I can't click in it. But what I'd like you to do is go ahead and reattempt it if you're allowed. If you're not allowed to, then please let me know. I really hope it will let you. We have one that's not allowed. Okay. Okay. Some people it will allow because it reset everybody's system. So I'm just going to give everybody a minute. Once you navigate into the pretest, if you're able, let me log out and see if I can come in through my other account and see if I can show you what it should look like. So some people, it looks like this, and all it has available is the pretest. If that's you, click in here. And it won't work on this one either. This is great. So if you're allowed to reattempt, then I would like you to not actually go through each question, but when you open the pretest on the right side of the screen over here, you'll see finish attempt, even if you haven't answered any of the questions. So go ahead and finish the attempt and then submit it. And when you come back to cell biology, everything should be unlocked. Now, if you are not allowed to take the pretest, I would like you to try to click on the post-test tile. And you see how it's grayed out, but you are still able to click on it. And this is not going to be true for everyone. I apologize. I'm just trying to meet every avenue of what it could look like for each person. We've messaged our technology center, and they are still trying to find out why this happened. So I'm very sorry that this is such a headache. And then you'll click complete cell biology post-test at the end of today when you're done with this section of the module. So that's how you find it. Now, I'm getting a bunch of messages in the chat about specific issues for everyone. And when it's time to do the modules, I'll take each of them into a breakout room because I can't possibly answer all questions at the same time right now. But I wanted to at least try to give you guys some solutions today so that more of you are able to move into where you should be when we start. I hope that helped. So hopefully it did help some of you. If not, like I said, when we get to the point when we're going to do our modules here in a second, anybody that needs help, I'll work with you all individually in a breakout room so that those who can work and go ahead and get started won't have to listen to it and they can work on their modules in the quiet. Okay?
Excuse me, you want us to work on the pretest?
Not at this time. No, I was just trying to get everybody corrected so that they could be ready to go. Thank you for asking. And when we get to modules again, I'll reiterate and restate what the instructions will be, okay? All right, so yesterday we learned from Callan about canine metastatic osteosarcoma. And while we were learning about that, we were building on the concepts of differences between plant and animal cells and how cells are organized into different levels to create an organism. We discussed with our osteosarcoma example what can happen if there's disruption at the cellular level and how that can overall impact the organism. And then I think that says exactly what I just said. So does anybody have any questions about what we talked about yesterday? Okay. So for today, we're going to be doing the last section of the cell biology module. We will find a solution to get all of you to be able to see the content. Again, I apologize. I'm trying my very best to make sure I can make this as good of an experience as I can, despite our issues we're coming in across. And then we will make sure to give you time to do the post-test. Once we have completed the post-test, we'll get into more of our discussion that we do every day. And we're going to be talking about the interworking relationship between cell membranes and the skin, or the doctor word for that would be the integumentary system. And how those work together to regulate your body fluids and the body fluids of veterinary patients, because we will be examining exercise-induced dehydration in horses. So today, the section of the cell biology module that we need you to work through is called cells versus organ systems. When you're done with the section, go ahead and let us know. And then once you have completed the module, because you've done the last section, you'll do the post-test, which was that last tile that I was showing you. And then once you've completed both, go ahead and put in the chat for us that you finished both. It says here that we'll give you about 30 minutes, but because we're going to try to work through technical issues in a breakout room, it could end up being a little bit more than that. We'll make sure to check in, okay? Now, as a recap, one of the reasons some people see that their content is not available is because the module overall wants you to retake or redo the pretest, which is what I was trying to help us work through a few minutes ago. So if you can see the information in your module, great. Go ahead and jump right into cells versus organ systems. If you can't, then go ahead and join me in a breakout room and we'll see how we can get it fixed, okay? So anybody that needs help, go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll go ahead and assign you to the breakout room, okay? It'll take me a minute to gather everybody and send us there, but we're gonna work it out, okay? let's learn more about cells and organ systems. So I told you before that we're going to be applying the knowledge of today's section by talking about dehydration in horses when they sweat. But before we talk about it, we as a team just wanted to let you know that the stuff we're going to talk about can be pretty complex. There's no doubt about it. So we just want to make sure that you've maybe kind of thought a little bit about it like a veterinarian has. But don't feel discouraged if you don't pick it up right away, because it takes a long time to learn this and feel really comfortable with it. But please ask as many questions as you would like to. Right now, we're just trying to introduce you to how the body works when you're dehydrated. And so we'd love to hear anything you want to ask about it as we go. So we've talked about the cells of these 4 days. One of the sections that we're going to talk about today is the integumentary system, or the skin. And we're going to do that by comparing the skin to the cell membrane. In the body, the cell membrane and skin work together to make sure that the fluid levels in your body are enough to support the health and life of your organs, like your liver, your stomach, your intestines, your skin itself, things like that. So let's take a look at this relationship. What are you gonna do without water? I do love puns. I did not come up with that one, but I'm glad that it's there. Why do you think fluids are important in the body? What do you guys think?
To keep you hydrated?
Yes, to keep you hydrated. What else? To transport things, to provide energy. Yeah, you guys have nailed it right on the head. All of the things that fluids do work together to provide energy, to transport things like nutrients, to transport things like oxygen with your red blood cells. And probably the most important one is to make sure all of the cells in your body maintain proper hydration. The majority of fluid in the body are circulating in the form of red blood cells. So your blood is made up of a bunch of cells, not only red blood cells, a bunch of other things, but we're going to keep it simple today. But even your red blood cells, which there's a picture of one here, this is a group of them traveling through a vessel in the body, they each have their own amount of liquid in them as well. Temperature control. Awesome. Thanks for contributing that, Dalton. You're right. So the rest of the fluid's body, if it's not in a cell, is existing in what we call the extracellular fluid. So the fluid hanging out around your red blood cells here, it would be considered extracellular fluid. And then, like I alluded to a little bit earlier, red blood cells are responsible for oxygen transport to our organs. So that's why it can be such a problem if you bleed too much, because you won't get enough oxygen to different organs in your body. Do you guys have any questions about that? This will be kind of a building block for what we keep talking about. So I want to make sure you feel good about it. Okay. No so far. Good. It looks like Dr. Johnson is contributing that fluids are important for excreting from the body. And that's right. The kidneys are a really large part of that. They work to create fluid that we excrete from our body to remove wastes that we do not need. So if there isn't enough fluid in the body or in the cells or outside of the cells, so in the red blood cells or in the extracellular fluid, there won't be an adequate supply of blood, because blood is made up of the fluid around the red blood cells and the red blood cells. And so, like I said, if that occurs, then you might not be able to carry oxygen to as many places as it needs to go. If oxygen transport is disrupted, then your vital organs may be deprived of oxygen. Can anybody name a vital organ for me? Your heart, your lungs, your brain, excellent. Your kidneys, oh, good one. Most people forget about your kidneys. Liver, yes, your liver is super important. Lungs again, I mean, that's how we breathe, so you're definitely right there. Nice job, guys. So the thing about oxygen transport disruption is that if they can, your organs can hang in there for a little bit of time, but if they go without oxygen for a prolonged period of time, then the organs can start to die. So here comes another kind of large hiccup that we're going to work through on how this process works. We're going to talk about at the cell membrane level, how your cells balance the electrolytes that are moved across the cell membrane. So this is how your cells also maintain fluid levels in the body by balancing electrolytes. In the background, you'll see here, they look like Gatorade and Powerade bottles. And when we typically think about electrolytes, we are thinking about these drinks that our coach makes us drink at football practice or tennis practice or at swim practice, but they're actually liquids that help us replace these electrolytes listed here. Sodium, which has the chemical symbol here. Didn't think chemistry would be a part of One Health, but here we are. Potassium and chloride. There are a couple others, but those are the big ones. Electrolytes hang out inside and outside of the cells of the body. So you have some of these sodium, potassium, and chloride electrolytes, in your red blood cells and some in the extracellular fluid. Now, there are specific parts of your cell membrane that are in charge of sending these electrolytes back and forth across the cell membrane to try to keep balance in the body. But a huge thing about this is that wherever these electrolytes go, water can follow them. And I think the next, that we'll have a picture here in a minute that'll kind of demonstrate that graphically. Water follows electrolytes. So this means that if there are more electrolytes outside of the cell, so for example, the red blood cell, then water will move outside of the cell. Water likes to be where there's the most electrolytes possible because water sits in that area and dilutes out the electrolytes. The opposite is also true. If electrolytes inside of the cell are more concentrated, then water will move into the cell. So water follows where it can get as much electrolyte company as possible. How does water do this? Water is able to move freely across the cell membrane, typically by something we call an aquaporin. You can think of the cell membrane as a wall. Throughout our cell membrane are special doors, for example, channels or aquaporins that allow certain electrolytes to move into or out of the cell. Water, on the other hand, could slip through cracks of our cell membrane. It doesn't always need a specific door like the electrolytes might need. So here is an illustration of what we're talking about. This is our red blood cell, and you see it's coded red. The cell membrane is also coded red because it's making up the outside perimeter of the red blood cell. So the doors in the cell membrane are here, and that is how the electrolytes can move in and out of the red blood cell. Electrolytes have to go through the doors. These doors are made specifically for them in the cell, which is pretty cool. But water can hang out and go wherever it wants to. So if you'll notice, there seems to be a higher concentration of electrolytes inside the cell. So there's more water in here than there is out here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 waters inside the cell right now, but only 3 on the outside of the cell. So I want to stop there and see if you guys have any questions, because I know it can be kind of overwhelming to process what is allowed to move through, what needs a door, what's a cell membrane, things like that. Not hearing any questions yet, but if you're still typing, I want to give you a second. All right. Sounds like we're doing okay. Oh, look, we have even more animation. So we have here that the water is moving freely into the cell. And you can also see by these arrows here that it can hang out right at the edge too and decide if it wants to go back or forth, because water is so free to move. So you might say, why does water do that? Why does water need to go where more electrolytes are? Remember, I mentioned the movement of water across cell membranes depends on how concentrated the electrolytes are inside and outside of the cell. Salts, so table salts, is made up of sodium and chloride, which I mentioned earlier were a couple of these big ones we're talking about. 2 sodium ions, or 1 sodium ion, excuse me, and 2 chloride ions. Now think about drinking salt water. Some of you may live near an ocean and you know how salty salt water is. The more salt you have in the water, the more salty it will taste. That means the salt is concentrated. If we add more water to the cup, more regular water, not seawater or salt water to the cup, the saltiness decreases because we've diluted out the salt in the cup. That decreases the salt concentration. Does anybody have any questions about that? Makes sense? Awesome. The point of this is to say that the body moves water into and out of the cell to make sure the blood keeps the correct balanced saltiness. So if you've never thought of your blood as being salty before, now you can. Water's whole job is to move in different ways around your body to make sure that the right amount of saltiness exists inside your cells and inside the extracellular fluid. So here in the background, you see a horse that is sweating. So we're going to get into kind of the patient care aspects of this. And the way we'll talk about that is with how the saltiness and the water in your body relate to one another when a horse or human dehydrated. Horses are especially susceptible to dehydration if they sweat for long, prolonged periods of time. When a horse sweats, it's actually losing fluid through its skin. I believe it was Dalton that said something about maintaining heat or thermal control. Sweat plays an important role in that, and that's why the horse does sweat. So why do horses sweat? You'll be relieved to know that this is not sweat on this horse. This horse is getting a bath, but it gets the point across that they can be quite heavy sweaters if they've been working hard. So like I said, they sweat to maintain their body temperature. Sweating is a mechanism created by the body to make sure that you as an organism or the horse as an organism does not overheat. it can be helpful in the short term, but if it happens for a long period of time, so the horse works all day and they keep sweating and they don't get to replace their fluids, then it can be a pretty dangerous situation. But how do we naturally replace fluids that we lose from sweating? What do you guys think? Drinking water, yes, that's the most simple solution we have here. Sweating, how does it affect the cell? When a horse loses fluid through its skin, the electrolytes in the extracellular fluid, so remember, if we look over here, these are actually red blood cells here, but they're upset red blood cells. And the black represents the extracellular fluid around them in your vessels, your arteries and veins. The electrolytes in that fluid become more concentrated. It's like taking water out of a glass and leaving the salt in there. The drink becomes especially salty because in this case, the salt is more concentrated because the horse has been losing the fluid that would normally be with that salt through sweat. Similarly, the extracellular fluid becomes more salty when the horse sweats. See? The body does not like major changes to how the electrolytes are concentrated. It can cause a lot of problems if they don't correct the fluid balances that are wrong. Does anybody have any questions about that? So far, so good? Okay. So we came back to this picture here that we had up earlier. If the horse loses water outside of the cell because they're sweating, water responds by moving across the cell membrane where more electrolytes are concentrated. This helps make sure that the actual concentration of the extracellular fluid can be corrected temporarily before the horse gets a drink of water. So if we go back, say the horse has been sweating and now this water here exits because it's been lost in the form of sweat. Well, we have a bunch of water here in the middle of the cell. And so the body is smart enough to say, you know what, we need more water out here where all of these electrolytes are. And so it'll actually move the water out into this green area representing the extracellular fluid. So I keep mentioning the negative effects of sweating for too long. Now this is a horse that has been sweating for a while. Hopefully he'll get a drink soon, but it looks like he's at a show, so he's doing his job. In the event that the horse is sweating for too long, water will no longer be able to leave the cells. So if we come back to this picture, we saw that this water in the cell exited out, whoops, to balance out all the salt out here. But you only have a set amount of water stored in your red blood cells. So there can come to a point when there's no more water to be shared, and that's when it becomes a problem. And this problem is represented by a decrease in the extracellular fluid altogether. Now the body has to work extra hard to make sure that the red blood cells that are carrying oxygen can even move around the body because there's not enough fluid in there with them to move them around. How do you guys feel about that? What questions do you have? sounds like you guys are okay with it, which is good, because this is the kind of things that veterinarians have to think about all the time. When our patients come to us when they're sick, they usually are dehydrated, and we have to see, well, how dehydrated are they? Have they gotten to the point where they don't have enough extracellular fluid? And one of the ways we can tell that is by listening to their heart, because the body has a way to then compensate additionally by increasing the heart rate to move the blood around, because by pumping the fluid that is too low faster, it can kind of make up for the fact that there's not enough fluid. Does it hurt a lot? Erin, I don't know if it actually hurts, but I know that when I'm really hot and dehydrated, I get a headache because my body's trying to tell me, hey, I need you to take a break. So I think that overall you get a really sick feeling if you're dehydrated like this, because your body's trying to warn you that it needs help and it needs you to drink water. That's a really good question. Are there any other questions? Okay. So I mentioned that veterinarians can check and see how dehydrated a patient is. So here's back to our horse example. What else can we see about the horse to tell us, other than it is really sweaty, that it is very dehydrated? So if you pick up the lip of yourself or of your horse or of your dog, underneath your lips are your gums. And veterinarians actually use that as a clue. We refer to your gums as mucous membranes. And when you're dehydrated, I don't know if you've ever been really hot and dehydrated, your mouth gets really dry. So we're checking for that. We say that things are not moist and they're tacky because the gums and the mouth just seems really dry. We can also do what we call a skin tent. So that's what this doctor's doing here. They just gently grab a little bit of the skin of the horse or the dog or the cat, and then they let it go. And in a normal patient, it should go right back to its normal position. But when the skin is dehydrated because the body has lost too much water, it'll actually be pretty rigid. And so it will take a lot longer to resume its normal position. So you may have seen a veterinarian do that to your own pet before, just to check how hydrated they are. Sunken eyes. So this horse up here on the right has what looks to be a pretty normal eye shape, but in horses and especially other large animals, sunken eyes means that the fluid in the eyes actually has decreased to the level that the eyes actually look too far back in the head because the patient is too dehydrated. And then when somebody brought up kidneys for us earlier, I think that was Michelle, when your body overall recognizes that it's dehydrated, your kidneys will decrease the amount of urine that you put out, because think about it, urine has fluid in it. So in order to save the fluid of your body, your kidneys will more concentrate your urine, and that will make it actually a really super dark yellow. And then I mentioned to Erin that I know I don't feel well when I'm dehydrated. I get a headache, irritability, or muscle cramping even. So if your horse suddenly just really doesn't want to move, it's not acting in its normal character, it could be because they're just too dehydrated and they need some help. Does anybody have any questions about recognizing the symptoms of dehydration as a veterinarian? Do the gums change color? Really good question. They don't typically change color. They will get a little bit paler, but they'll still be pink. If the gums turn a blue color or a really white color, it's usually for another medical reason, but you can be so dehydrated that it will change color. It just takes a very, 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 very long time for that to happen. Somebody mentioned to me capillary refill time. And what we do is we'll actually push down on the gums themselves. And when we do that, we're actually compressing the little blood vessels that are filled with blood that make your gums appear pink. And when we do that, we're blocking blood from entering that area of the gums. And so when you take your finger off, you wait and you count and see how long does it take before blood will resume that area, or how long does it go from being white to pink. Normally it takes about 2 seconds, depends on the species of animal that we're talking about. But when a patient is dehydrated, that can be prolonged because, like we talked about, there's not enough fluid in the blood vessels. So the heart is having to work harder. Good question, Michelle. Any other questions? Okay. So how do we correct dehydration? We give them fluids. Like we talked about earlier, the most common thing you and I would do is we would go drink water. But how do you think we give fluids to a horse? What do you guys think? IV. IV meaning intravenous or in the vein. Any other ways? Let it drink. Yep. Through the nose. Good one. I'm really happy to hear nobody put under the skin, because we're actually not allowed or not able to do that in the horse. They don't have enough free space for us to do it under the skin. So the most common ways we do it are orally. And I'm super glad somebody said nose, because we actually can't put the tube down the mouth of the horse. It has to go through their nose because of the anatomy of how their nose works with their throat. And then the other way would be intravenously, to give fluids directly into the vein, which is the most quick way of restoring the blood volume, because I think I just answered this section question. You knew because of the picture? That's okay. That's a really good picture. It's something we do really common. This is the nasogastric tube here. It's called naso because it goes through the nose. Naso means nose, gastric meaning it connects to the stomach. So this tube can actually be pushed up the horse's nose and down to the stomach so that fluids can be put directly into their stomach. When we give fluids intravenously, we don't have to wait for them to swallow the fluids and then for the fluids to be absorbed through the digestive system. It goes right into their bloodstream. Are you checking the horse if it has COVID-19? Very funny. I don't think horses can get COVID-19. Cats and dogs can though. So administering Ib fluids. Horses weigh a whole bunch, so they actually need quite a bit of fluids. You can see up here in the picture that these are actually three liter bags, maybe even 5 liter bags that are hanging, and they have this big, long, stretchy line to hang the fluids with. So they need a catheter. Here's the catheter placed in what we call the jugular vein of the horse. Then 5 liter fluid bags. And the amount that we need to administer depends on how much we estimate they are dehydrated. So based on those symptoms I talked to you about, are their eyes sunken in? Does their skin need more help returning to its elastic level it should be at with a skin tint test? Do they have a decreased amount of spit in their mouth? Is their mouth really dry? Where do you put the IV? We normally put it right here in the neck because it's a really big vein called the jugular vein. And so it allows us to put the fluids into their bloodstream at a very high rate to get them feeling better as soon as possible. Now, we do have to then monitor the horse if we're giving them fluids in the vein, because we can actually overhydrate a patient as well. And that's a whole nother ball of wax to talk about. One potential effect that you may have heard of before is called edema. And that's because if you think about that red blood cell, it can hold some water. And then there's fluid as well outside of the red blood cells in your blood vessels. But if there's too much fluid, then it'll actually then go outside of your blood vessels, underneath your skin and in between other cells and form edema. So you get really swollen and puffy, and that doesn't make you feel well. So with that, what questions do you have? Yes, ma'am. Good question, Gina. Overhydration can also be a cause of death because the opposite can be true of too much saltiness is bad. Well, if you have too little saltiness because there's too much water, some of your cells in your body can die. And so that can also cause death. Thank you for asking that. That's something we have to be careful with when we're giving fluids to our patients in veterinary medicine. Any other questions? Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is Ms. Callan is gonna add up the points. And while she's doing that, the last thing I have is a survey for you guys, if you'll fill it out for us, that's made by us to tell us what you liked and what you did not like, what we can do better for you if you join us next year. So let me pull that up and put it in the chat for you, okay? It shouldn't take too long. I think it's about 20 multiple choice questions and a couple short answer. There you go. It's in the chat. We'll give you a couple minutes to do that, and then we'll come back together for any last questions, okay? Just a couple other things I wanted to talk about with you guys today. We're done with this camp so far, and we're so glad you were here hanging out with us, whether that was on the videos and then you joined us live, or if you've been live the whole time. We hope you really enjoyed it. We did. We love talking about vet med and how it works with One Health and how that works with basic science concepts. We hope we've sparked an interest in you to pursue a career in veterinary medicine. And then this here is the survey that I just sent you. Want to learn more? So first of all, let me just remind you that if you had any issues or if you weren't quite there today, please go ahead and take your post test for the module that we did. But there's a bunch of other ones to learn on here. At One Health, we have the ability for you to learn about stress, for you to learn about clinical trials, genetics, zoonotic diseases, infectious diseases, and those are all available to you to learn as you need or if you're interested. And then we also have our peer website. Let me see. Let me find it. Which also has a bunch of resources for you here. So please feel free to explore that.
Maybe go to videos, sorry. And you can see the interviews with the vet students.
Okay.
Come down. To the right. Yep.
We have a couple of recordings from other vet students that if you want other perspectives. So this one here was interested in veterinary medicine related to mixed animals. I know we have at least one student that's interested in zoo medicine, so you can hear about how they became where they are now and what their plans were. So,
and if you move on down, you can see it says one of them's on how to get into vet school.
Hope you guys don't get seasick.
Right there. There we go.
So yeah, take a look at these if you'd like to hear more about it. I know we've talked about it a bunch, but it's always good to hear multiple perspectives.
Okay, if you got a direct message from me, if you could reply back to it and let me know that you did get it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and then we have just 10 minutes left here. So we wanted to open the floor one more time for you guys to ask us any questions you had about going to college, about One Health, about cell biology, about dehydration, about how to become a specific type of vet. I know we talked about careers yesterday, so this time is for you. So please ask us anything you'd like to.
How do you balance your time for studying?
Good question. We talked about it in our virtual tour, but I guess there's always a bunch of different perspectives we could offer for that. I am the queen of to-do lists. I always make sure that I have written down what I'd like to accomplish for the day, and that helps me stay on track. I think that a large part of it is not just working 24/7 on vet school, but also making sure you take times to take breaks, because if you don't give your brain a break, then it won't be able to work as hard as it can for you. But what do Kristen or Callan want to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Margaret said. Just make sure that you have a planner. That works the best for me because I have everything that I need to do within that planner. Also, when things are due, there's so many different due dates within vet school and college in general that it's very easy to forget one little assignment or even a test. Sometimes my friends will be like, when do we have this test? I'm like, it's tomorrow. And they're like, oh, okay, I gotta study. So yeah, that's really important. I know we also talked about this, I think for the tour, or maybe it was the first day. But just keeping a log of everything that you're doing, whether that's community service, leadership positions, just everything that you do, keep a log, keep it all in one place so that it's easy to find when it comes time to do your applications for everything.
How do you know what area you want to go to in vet school? Large animal, small animal, zoonotic, nutrition, food animal. How do you know?
I think the common phrase we hear in vet school is you think you're going to go into vet school doing one thing, but by the time you graduate, it's probably something different. I know when I entered vet school, I was considering being a mixed animal practitioner because there is such a shortage of them. But I learned pretty quickly that while I do actually really love learning about being a doctor as a mixed animal practitioner, I love teaching and I love working in an academic setting too much. So I will go on and be a small animal specialist because that's where I can meet that passion of mine. But I know Kristen's experienced a bit of change as well.
Yeah, so I initially was doing small animal practice for about 2 years. And then I got to Texas A&M and I was like, okay, I want to just put myself out there, try just different things. So I shadowed at a large animal vet for a winter break. I loved it. I found that's where my passion is. I love being in a barn, being able to go out to a pasture. It was just so cool to get to do all those things outside of a regular practice. And then so I did that. And then I started interning at a safari park here at Texas A&M. And I discovered I also love that. So at the moment, I am between exotics and large animal medicine. So we shall see where that story goes. But my advice would be just to put yourself out there and try a little bit of everything, because you're not really going to know what you really like and that you're passionate until you see all the different options. Because there's so many things you can do with a degree in veterinary medicine.
Yeah, I agree. Some students, they get to their 4th year of vet school, and on their second to last 2-week clinics rotation, they experience dermatology and they go, oh my goodness, this is the coolest thing. And they change their whole career path. So it's a very flexible degree, which is sensational.
And for me, I want to do mixed animal practice in a rural area. Those areas are kind of lacking veterinarians just because they're not necessarily the most desirable places to go to some. It really just depends on who you are and what you like. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no, this is what you have to do. It's completely up to you. So, but that's just how I grew up. I love large animals. I love the rural life. I don't like cities. I went to Tarleton. I know a lot of you know that, but it's a very small town because I knew I didn't want to come to A&M for 8 years of school because it was just too big for me, and it still is too big for me, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what I want to do and where I want to go and the animals I love working with.
Do y'all have any tips for joint projects that you have with other veterinary students? Or like, say, if you got an anatomy table, you have 4 or 6 students, how do you get everybody to do their part that day? Or any tips?
So it sounds like you're asking if we have tips for if you have to work with people that maybe you haven't worked with before, which is something you do encounter a lot in vet school. I know that our school is actually really good about giving us communication tools. So before we even start vet school, they have us all take our Myers-Briggs test and find out, are you an introverted person? Are you an extroverted person? And then they have an introverted person talk to an extroverted person, frankly, about what is it you do or do not like about interacting with people who are not the same personality type as yours. And by doing that, we're given a lot of tools of how to approach somebody whose brain just works differently in a group setting than ours might. So I think that that's really great. Heaven has a question for us. If you don't know exactly what you want to do, but you have a broad idea, what classes would you take? For example, I like marine biology, but I don't know what I want to do with it. Kristen, I think you would probably be the best to start with that one.
Real quick before Kristen goes, I've had 2 of the 3 people message me back. If you're the 3rd person who got it, please respond. Otherwise, I will be going down the list to the 4th person. So please do so in the next couple minutes.
Maybe Kristen's having an issue with her mic for a second. We'll give her a minute. I'll go. I think that no matter what you think your interest is, go ahead and explore it, because if you are interested in going to vet school, you'll have to do the same prerequisites no matter what. And having explored your interests like marine biology will make you a more interesting candidate for vet school, because you didn't just do exactly the same thing as everybody else. You said, I was really interested in this, and so I chased it and I did it for myself. Vet schools really appreciate that, because the more different we all are in vet school, the better doctors we can be as a group, because we have different perspectives to bring to the table if we're having a medical problem for one of our patients we can't figure out. So I think that you just worry about doing the prerequisites for vet school or whatever professional school you might be interested in, but don't forget to do things that you're really interested in, like marine biology, because the basics that vet school asks for will get you a good foundation for no matter what type of veterinarian you're going to be.
And to add to what Margaret said a little bit, for, like you said, I like marine biology, but don't know what to do with it, what you want to do with it. So whenever you get into vet school, I'm not sure if we've talked about this before, but you can join clubs. So like she was saying, everyone takes the same classes for the most part. Every now and again, you get to take a few electives, and that kind of helps you decide your path that you're going towards. But there are a bunch of clubs you can do. So like the exotics and wildlife and marine clubs. And with that, you get to learn a whole bunch about those specific species that you wouldn't normally in class. And you can do wet labs with that. And so that can give you a really good idea of, is this something that I really like, or would I prefer to work on horses, for example, or whatever species you may pick. So that, as far as like you don't know what to do with it, those clubs kind of help you figure out if that's something you want to do and what you can do with it and how to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And how long is vet school? So vet school is 4 years, but that is on top of generally 4 years of undergrad. It doesn't necessarily have to take you 4 years to do your undergraduate program, as long as you get all your prerequisites done for vet school. But vet school itself is 4 years long. And then, like Margaret always likes to talk about, if you want to specialize in something, it's extra training after that.
You're right. I do love to talk about it. I could talk about it all day. Do you have any tips for managing stress or anxiety? I think that everybody's a little bit different in that regard. Some people are stressed out by being around too many people. Some people are stressed about a long to-do list. Some people are stressed that maybe they won't do as well as they hope they can. And all of those are very normal and very acceptable things to be worried about. For me personally, I like to always, kind of take my stress temperature each day, and I know when I need to just take a break. Because sometimes, even if my to-do list is as long as my arm, I know that the only way I'm going to successfully do it is if I do step away from school and take a break for myself. Because like I talked about earlier, if my brain is just not in a good place because I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm upset, I won't be able to do my to-do list that's as long as my arm until I've given myself a break. So I think the biggest thing I would always say is build breaks into it. Sometimes you think that you'll be less stressed if you could just get everything done on your list, but I find that the opposite is true. If you can take a break and then tackle your list, it'll go much better.
So we have another one that says, what is your favorite part about vet school? I feel like this is an all three of us question. So my favorite part about vet school is whenever, like the species that I'm really passionate about, so like livestock and farm animals, whenever we have labs and stuff like, whenever we have labs that are basically anything to do with those species, we generally get to do it on like fake animals first, but then we get to go and look or do something on a real animal. And whenever it's something that I've never done before and I get to do for the very first time, which there's a lot of that going on at vet school, that is my favorite part, because the hands-on part and the visualizing hands-on with an actual animal in front of me is how I learn best. And it's most exciting to me and most fun to me. So that is definitely my favorite part.
Yeah, I totally agree with Callan. Like the hands-on labs were definitely my favorite part. And we had this one, it's a wet lab. So it was through my equine club that I'm in. And so we went out and learned out about how to do lameness exams in horses. And so I was really excited about that because I was like, yes, I can finally do something that's going to be practical later on in my career. Also, courses like anatomy, where you're going to be using that knowledge every single day, makes the class more interesting because you're like, I'm not just learning this science class that I don't know how is going to be like applicable to my career in the future. So that's probably my favorite part.
What is a wet lab?
A wet lab. Okay, yes. I'm glad you asked that question. So a wet lab is where you get to go do basically like an activity outside of your normal classwork. And so like for this wet lab, we went out to a horse barn that's nearby the school. And there were all these like special clients that came out that board their horses at this ranch. And so we got to do, we were first taught how to do a lameness exam by professionals who do this every day out at this ranch. And then we got to do it ourselves afterwards. Also did one that was called a darting wet lab. And this was for like exotic animals. And so we actually got to learn how to shoot a darting gun into this fake hog. Yeah, it was a fake pig basically that was up against a wall. So we got to practice shooting that. And that was through the zoo exotics club at Oklahoma State.
All right, I know it's 3:05, so I want to be respectful of your time. I'll go ahead and answer the third part of that last question, just so you guys can hear from all three if that's what you wanted. My favorite part of vet school kind of falls in line with the other two vet students here is the application of what we learn. So in your first year, you learn what's normal. In your second year, you learn what's abnormal. And I'm going into my third year now. And towards the end of your second year, they finally start asking you questions as if you're the doctor. And it's just super rewarding to actually see all this knowledge that you weren't really sure why they were making you learn it, because it's really hard. And you can feel yourself processing these difficult medical questions and finding the correct answer. And so I find that really rewarding that I can see the work my faculty are doing and how they are turning me into a good doctor for my patients. So that's what I love about vet school. I think the overall answer, I guess, would be the process of changing us into doctors is just incredible to me. Just one last reminder, these recordings will be available to you tomorrow. So if there's anything you want to review, or if you need those instructions on how to access the post-test or anything like that, they'll be in that recording tomorrow. Please email us with any other questions you might have. We're always here and we're happy to answer them, okay? You're welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. You guys have a great day and a good weekend.
Best of luck to all of you in your future careers. Thanks for coming.